Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi continues with Bava chapter 6, Mishnah Daled, entering the wide world of Eish, of fire. Hasholeach et haba'ira biad cherish shotivikotan. So somebody sends a fire source in the hands of a cherish, someone who's deaf, mute, and unable to communicate in those days and assumed to be intellectually less developed, or a shote, someone who is out of their mind, so they have an intellectual incapacity, disability. Vikotan, a minor under bar bat mitzvah, pater bedine adam. Now they don't have to pay in court, v'chayiv bedine shemayim, but to put things right, to do tshuva, and Elul is just around the corner, Rabotai. Elul, the time of tshuva. Every day is the time of tshuva. Elul has a special koach, a special power for the acceptance of tshuva, of return to Hashem. So to make things really right, he should pay anyway, even though they can't hold him liable in court. Now in the Gemara, they explain the fire, the be'era in this case, it has to be something like a coal, where yes, there's a fire inside, but it's not readily available to cause damage unless maybe it's put on some very dry kindling, very dry straw, or it's blown on by the person carrying it, then it will readily cause damage. Of course, if somebody gave a flaming torch or a big Havdalah candle that's all lit and going to a Chereshot Katan, the person who gave them the fire would have to pay. The Mishnah brings the corollary, Shalach biad pikeach, if he gave the fire source to somebody who is fully capable, has no disability, hapikeach chayev, that person is obligated, even in court, for any damages that result. How about echad heviat, or one person brings the flame, echad heviat eitzim, another person brings the fuel. Hameviat eitzim chayev, the one who brings the fuel source is liable for any damage caused by the fire, because without fuel, the fire cannot last or go anywhere. Echad heviat eitzim, if one person brought the fuel, echad heviat ur, another person then brought the flame, hameviat ur chayev. So fuel by itself doesn't do anything unless you apply a flame to that fuel and then it lights up and then it can spread and go somewhere. Ba'acher v'liba, if now a third person comes along and is liba, now lev is a heart, but here it means inflamed it. It means, blew on it and got it going hotter, going higher. Hamilobe chayev, that person who blew on the fire, who fanned the flames, they are responsible for any damage that results. Libta haruach, if the wind itself fanned the flames to the point where they could spread and cause damage, kulan peturim, all of the people involved are exempt. Now in the Gemara they explain, if it's just the normal breeze that's causing the problem, the people still need to pay, because they shouldn't have left a fire in a place where a normal breeze could fan it into a larger fire that could spread and cause damage. We're talking about an exceptionally strong wind that they could not have foreseen, that was not normal for this area. That's the case where they would be pater. Obviously, starting a fire in an area where a normal breeze could cause it to spread, they're liable for the spread. Now, the Mishnah turned now to the scope of liability. Hasholeach hadebeira, somebody sent their fire out, or they let it spread negligently. It consumed wood, or avanim, or it scorched rock. So afar, it singed the dirt. Now they're going to have to plow again. Chayav, they have to pay for these damages. Shenemar, because the Torah tells us, ki teitzei eish, when fire goes out, umatza kotzim, and it finds thorns. V'nechol godi, sure it consumes a haystack, or a kama, or standing grains, el hazoda, or the field. Really, anything in the field, even the field itself, the dirt itself, could be damaged. And the pasuk concludes, Sholem yesholem, he must surely pay hamavir et be'era, the one who started the fire. Avra goder, but what if the fire crossed over a stone fence? Shugavoa arba amot, that's 4 amot tall. That's a pretty significant fence. O derech harabim, or the fire crossed over the public street. Now there wasn't flammable material typically left in the street, so it's crossing a street maybe from the force of the wood or the wind, or there's tumbleweed or something. It's a 16 amma street. Is a derech harabim? It's very large. O nahar, or it jumps over a river. Pater, the person who lit the fire is not liable for the damage that occurs after it crosses this boundary, because that's not a normal boundary for a fire to cross. It's an exceptionally strong fire, so it's like onus. It's like it's out of his control. Now this scope of liability is actually debated, as the Mishnah adds a modlik betoch shalo, someone's lighting a fire in his own property, od kama tavor deleka. how far should he be concerned that fire must spread? So this opinion is holding even if he has a wall or a river, if it's within a certain radius from the original fire source, he would be liable anyway. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer, roin oto ki'iluhu be'emsa beit kor. We imagine the fire as if it's in the middle of a beit kor. So the Mefarshim explain it's really 136 and a half amot distant. So if the fire spreads 137 amot, he's not liable for something that happened after that radius, because that's not normal for a normal fire to spread that far. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Sheishesrei Amot, K'derech Hashut Rabbi. Rabbi Eliezer says anything within 16 amot, you need to be concerned that your little campfire might spread and take precautions, and he'd be liable if it damages anything within that radius. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Chamishim Amar. Rabbi Kiva brings a source, 50 amot is the radius of liability. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Sholem Yisholem Hamavir Tveira. Rabbi Shimon goes back to that pasuk, and that's in Shemot, Exodus chapter 22, verse 5. The one who ignited the fire must surely pay. So this includes Hakol Lefia Deleka. So everything depends on the fire. So it depends on the size of the fire, the area they're in, the likelihood of winds, the likelihood of having dry kindling there. So the judges would have to determine on a case-by-case basis if the person who started the fire might reasonably have known or reasonably foreseen that it would have spread to this other location, then he is still liable to pay. On to Mishnah. Hey, a modlik et a godish. Someone is setting fire to a haystack. Now this is his own haystack and his own property, but then it spreads. V'hayubo kelim. And then it spreads to another haystack, the Gemara explains, and it burns things up, and there were kalim in that haystack. V'dolku, they got burnt up. So it wasn't just hay or grain in the neighbor's haystack. He might have had a plow in there, he might have had a needle in a haystack, proverbially, or he might have been hiding valuable golden vessels up in there. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yisholem Ma Shebetocho. The fire starter has to pay for everything that was in the haystack, even if it wasn't normal stuff that you would find in a haystack. Chachamim Omer, the other sages disagree. They say, Eino Misholem Ele Godish Shel Chitin Shel Sorin. They say, no, he only pays the value of the haystack, whatever it was a stack of grain of wheat, or of barley. So they would agree, says the Bartanura, even this space, if there was a bunch of kalim, a bunch of pots and pans within that haystack, and they all cracked and were ruined, so he would pay the entire volume, the entire value of whatever it was. You could see from the outside, wheat or barley, but he wouldn't be held liable for things that are tamun, that are hidden within the haystack. Now that would be kalim. What about living creatures? Haya gedi kofut lo, if there was a goat tied to this haystack, or maybe it's like a bin of firewood or a bin of grains, or there's an eved who's taking care of the stuff, he's standing next to it, nisraf imo, and somebody lit this haystack or fuel source on fire, and these things were burned up with the fuel, chayiv, he has to pay. So Gemara explains he's chayiv to pay for the haystack and the goat, but the eved is a person, he had no problem running away, should have run away. Eved kofutlo, what if the eved was actually tied to this godi, to the haystack? Gedi samachlo, and there was a goat standing next to it, nisafimo potter. The eved was nebuch burned up with this haystack. The person who lit the haystack on fire is basically potter from payment because he's chayiv misa. He's chayiv a death penalty for doing an act that led to the death of this eved, or really any person who is stuck in this situation. And we've seen this concept before called kimle b'derabamine. We give him the worst punishment. We were talking about someone who, God forbid, hit one of his parents, so he wouldn't pay damages because he can be liable to the death penalty in that case. So to here in arson that causes death is a death penalty, so he wouldn't pay damages for the people he killed, but would still pay damages for all of the property that was destroyed. Finally, Modim Chacham Rabbi Yehuda. The other sages do agree with Rabbi Yehuda, but Madlik Habira, if somebody lights a home or a building, a structure on fire, Shumashalem Kol Ma Shabadocha, he has to pay for every single thing that was in that house. Sheken Derech B'nei Adam La'aniach Bebatim, because people put anything and everything in their homes. So somebody starting such a fire there is on the hook for everything, even though for the haystack case, the sages disagree and say they're not liable for things that are not normally found in the haystack. Tizkula mitzvot, everyone should please God say stay safe from fires.